Hey guys, it's Red from Game2Misbehave, and today I'm going to be making something. So I'm going to start off with these tools here. I've got just some little silicone tools and things like that. I'm also using some polymer clay and and this board here that I got at a store, a couple of brushes, and some paint. So that's what we're going to be using today. Now I'm also going to use this Dremel tool here and a little bit of a bit. There are some better tools that you can use for this. This was my first time making it. Oh, and some tinfoil as well. This was my first time making this particular project, so there are definitely some things that I would do differently next time. And I will do differently next time. If you like this video, just let me know and we'll do more. But today we are going to be making a peeper from Subnautica. And I decided that when I wanted to do this project that I was going to do it as if I had caught the peeper with a pole and, you know, a piece of bait, I guess. Not exactly sure what peepers eat, but you know, that I caught it while I was fishing and I had it stuffed and mounted on the wall because, you know, creepy and keeping dead things on the wall. So the first thing you want to do is make a wire frame that kind of somewhat resembles your peeper, and then you're going to build out most of the mass of the peeper with tinfoil. And the reason we're doing this is because A, polymer clay is very expensive, and B, if you make an actual polymer clay thing this hefty, it might not actually cure in the oven all the way through. So you want to make sure that you can actually cure the clay all the way through. So we bulk it out mostly with that. Now here you see I've got my polymer clay. I had two different kinds of polymer clay. This particular one was working pretty well. You can see it just takes a little bit of kneading, and then I didn't have a rolling pin, so I just used what I got because that's what we do here. And you know, I'm just kind of flattening it out. This is going to be the main body of it. And here, this is, you can see it's a little bit of a different one. I believe this is Fimo. And it kind of started crumbling like this, and I didn't really realize it at first, but it's not supposed to do that. I tried everything in my power to possibly get this stuff to work. I think it was just old. I bought this a long time ago, and it just crumbled, and it took forever to get it to knead into any kind of something that I could make. I edited out almost all of that kneading, so this video originally was like 2 hours long. So I edited out most of that, but gosh, you know, for like 2 or 3 days, I had blisters on my fingers from just kneading this clay. And I found out later that it's not supposed to do that. It's actually supposed to be a lot easier than that. So if your clay is doing that, just throw it out and go get new clay. I even tried heating it up later. I'll show you where I did that. And that didn't work either. It didn't make it any kind of better. But so as you can see, I'm just kind of, you know, putting a skin essentially on the outside of my peeperfish. And I don't have enough blue clay, so I'm going to get a little crafty here in a second. But, you know, you just smooth it out as best you can. And that is the other reason why I probably should have just thrown out that old clay and gotten new clay. But I was impatient and I wanted to do this today. So this is where I'm getting a little crafty. I'm actually pulling out the stuff from where I'm going to put the eye, because the eye is going to be yellow anyway. And I'm just trying to take out as much clay as I possibly can in order to, you know, put it on the tail, because the tail needs more clay. But I really should have just thrown out that old clay. Here you can see me putting it on the end of there, on the end of the tail. I should have just thrown out that old clay, because it turns out in the end I was not able to smooth out the peeper as much as I wanted to, and as much as I should have been able to. I tried so hard to smooth out his skin. I ended up putting some more texture in it, so it was okay, but it could have been a lot better in the long run. So you can see I'm just kind of like trying to smooth it out here, forming the eye into as round of a shape as I can. The peeper's eyes are very, very round, and I tried my best to make it as round as possible. But here it is. And then what you're going to want to do is, I don't know exactly what these pieces are called, but they've got these little fins that come out of the top and the bottom. What I'm going to guess is like a dorsal fin, and then possibly a pectoral fin that used to be two that kind of melded into one. I don't know. I don't know exactly what they would be called. There is a fish on planet Earth, because obviously this is from Subnautica, so these fish are not found here on planet Earth. They are found on the Subnautica planet, which I cannot remember what the name of it is. It's a series of numbers and then a B at the end. But these fish, there is a fish on planet Earth that has a very similar setup without the long tail. It's called an ocean sunfish, and if I can figure out what those fins are called on the ocean sunfish, I will go ahead and put them in here. But as of right now, I have no idea if those fins have a specific name. But so we're just kind of sculpting these fins. You want to make sure they're approximately the same size. And they've even got like a little, it almost looks like a bulbous end, or an end that you would find on the tail end of like a squid tentacle. It's almost like a palm or something like that. So you just want to kind of shape it and continue to smooth it out, blend it as best you can, and just go with it. So after you're done blending and everything like that, I started making some of the little details. I kind of jumped the gun on this one. I wish I had actually waited until a little bit later because I ended up messing some of them up later on before I actually put this in the oven. But I started making some little details like the little holes and things like that that this fish has in his lateral line, which is, you know, the line through the fish where they've got most of their sensory organs and things like that. So who knows exactly what peepers actually do with these holes, but there are decorations on there, and I wanted to make sure that I got them on there before I actually fired him in the oven. So this is when I decided that I wanted to start using my yellow clay, so I washed my little paws, and I got out my yellow clay and realized it was doing the same thing as the blue clay. So this blue clay I actually put on a heating pad, folded the heating pad over top of it, and put it on the lowest warm setting you possibly can, because you don't want this clay to get too hot or it'll start to set up, which I think might have been what happened to this, because I think I may have left it in my car on accident. But if you heat the clay up a little bit, it becomes a little bit easier to kind of work with initially, and then as you need it and stuff like that, your body temperature will warm it up and it'll become real easy to work with. But like I said, this particular clay just didn't seem to want to work. So here you can see I'm making the fins on the back of the fish. Oh gosh, this is taking me back to my college days. I can't remember what all these are called. I believe these are called flukes or caudal fins. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what they're called on fish. Again, if I figure it out, I'll look it up. But you go ahead and sculpt the back of the fish, the fins and things like that. You're going to want these to be a little bit thinner just because they are fins rather than like the appendages that we put on him earlier, which I called fins. But they're thicker. They're more like appendages. These are actual fins. And I believe this is what the peeperfish uses to actually propel itself through the water. So you just kind of want to sculpt and blend it together. Make sure that you've got it on there real nice and good and make it look like a fin. Here I started to put a little bit more detail in the fins. Again, I should have done this a little bit later, but I decided to do it now. And I first used one of those silicone tools, but it didn't seem to do as well of a job, and it actually ended up ripping part of it off of the tin foil. So I used this small little pin here, this pin tool, and just kind of scraped a little bit of texture into his fins. Some deeper ones, which I will darken up later with paint, and then some thinner ones. Went ahead and fixed up these holes because I touched them and made them look a little bit wonky. And then I started to add a little bit of texture around the eyes. It looks kind of like in the reference picture that I was looking at for this whole thing. Mind you, you need a reference picture because I did not know exactly how detailed the peeperfish was until I looked at it up close. But now I'm just kind of putting some folds in that I see in the picture, some of those little tiny details around the eye, on the skin, on these top fins here, things like that. Just any little details that you see in the picture, in your reference picture, you want to go ahead and put that in now before you fire him, so that way it'll look decent when you paint him at the end. So I washed my hands again, and now I started working with the yellow clay, and I kind of wish I had washed my hands just a tad bit more than I did because the yellow clay ended up turning blue. The other thing that I could have done to avoid this in hindsight is I could have fired the fish now, put him in the oven, and went ahead and baked the blue clay as it was, and then added the yellow clay later. The thing is that I didn't have any of the liquid clay in order to get the raw clay and the fired clay to stick together, so I ended up doing it all at once, and my yellow clay ended up turning into yellow clay with blue streaks in it. So just as an FYI, if you have the ability to, if you're going to do this project yourself, oh, now see, this is what real clay is supposed to do. It's supposed to be easy like that. That was actual real time. That was all of the kneading that I needed to do for that brown clay. I don't know if that brown clay was newer or if it was just better clay. I don't know, because I didn't really have the packaging for all of this clay because I bought it a while ago. But that clay worked really, really well. So go ahead and put some more details in there. You just want to make sure you get all the details in, the big details in that you want before you fire him in the oven. And I keep calling it firing because I work usually with kiln-fired clay, you know, like terracotta and things like that. In the past, this is one of the first times I've ever worked with polymer clay, which you can actually bake in the oven. So if you hear me calling it firing, that's why. But this is not anything you have to put in a kiln. It's easy stuff. You just put it in the oven at a certain degree for an amount of time, and then you get a nice solid object when you come out in the end. So you want to put as many details in as you can now, because this is going to be the easiest time to put it in. So you see I'm kind of making a ring in the middle. Well, if you can see it, it's a little blown out with that yellow. My gosh, that yellow is yellow. But you can see me making a little ring. That's where his iris is going to be, and then ultimately his pupil at the end. Just because it has a little bit of dimension in there, so you can kind of see it a little bit there. That's all the details that I got in there. So I think right now we're going to go fire him. It's 110 degrees C or 230 F at 30 minutes. So now he's nice and out of the oven. I let him cool, and he's hard, so I'm going to take that little spiky tool and just put minor details back into him. Just some little scratches here and there from where his beak has, you know, some indentations in it. And I'm going to kind of round off his pupil a little bit better, put in a little bit more detail around his eye, and a little bit more detail in his tail. And then we'll get on to painting. So one of the reasons I put the wax paper down on the table was A, to protect my table from the clay, but also because I knew I was going to be painting, and I don't have a palette anymore. I got rid of my old palette when I moved, so I just put the paint right on the table. And I didn't want to ruin my table, so that's what the paper's there for. So I'm just using some old brushes that I ended up throwing away after all of this because I forgot and left the paint on them. But you can kind of see I'm painting the fins here. And I'm going to paint in layers. Now everything's going to go in layers. So these fins are in the picture that I was looking at. And I definitely suggest you have a reference picture. These fins are greatly lighter than the rest of the peeper, which in game, sometimes they're not because of the lighting in the game. And the game is gorgeous if you haven't seen it. Subnautica is gorgeous. Go watch a Let's Play of it, or watch my Let's Play. Well, it's not a Let's Play, but watch my highlights of it, because I have played the game before and I absolutely adore it. I die all the time, but I do love the game. So as you can see, I'm putting some darker blue on there just to kind of dull out because it was really, really bright. And in the picture, it's not quite that bright. But the good thing about this is the more layers of color you put on there, the more dimension there is. So you'll see that those tail fins are going to change color 2, 3, 4 times. So I'm putting some dark in the holes just to make the holes look a little bit more like they've got some depth, you know, to them. I'm going to end up putting some black in there a little bit later. And you can also see now the peeperfish is upside down for you. He's right side for me, but he's upside down for you guys. So I'm taking a little bit of that darker blue and making the bottom of him just a tad bit darker. And then in the game, there's a lot of bioluminescence. So I figured there would be some bioluminescent light coming from the bottom, so I just kind of wanted to make it look like there was a little bit of light coming from the bottom, shining off the bottom of this peeper. I don't know from what kind of fish, but Maybe it's nighttime, look at that. Just a little bit of glow coming from the bottom of the planet. And then I took some of the yellow paint and I tried to paint over the blue, but this paint, for whatever reason, again, is very old because I haven't done a project like this in a while, but it didn't seem to cover over. And then I forgot that I didn't have black and brown, which I do need for this project, so I thought I would try and see if spray paint would work, because I know it's worked before in the past, and I didn't shake the spray paint up enough. There we go. So the spray paint ended up being the savior of this project because I thought I was going to be at an impasse without those colors. So in a pinch, figure something out, you know, try something different. And these paints ended up working remarkably well. So in, you know, some of my next videos, I may actually end up using spray paints totally because they tend to be a little bit more liquid and they move around a little bit better than the acrylic paints do. So here I'm making my peeperfish look like he's got the worst red eye on the planet. Maybe I poked him in the eye on accident, you know, but I promise you it will start to look better. I know peeper's eyes are yellow and I'm kind of turning it very muddy brown right now. But again, the more layers you put on with the paint, the better it's going to look. So this is just the bottom layer. And when you look at the pictures of, you know, the up close of the peeperfish, they do have a little bit of definition in the corners of their eyes and stuff like that. Yes, their eyes are mostly yellow. Here I am trying to put a little bit more yellow black back in. With that acrylic paint, it didn't really work really well. So I kind of got creative a little bit later. But, you know, so it's starting to look a little muddy, but that's kind of what the base of the eye is supposed to look like. It'll get better as we go on. And now we're putting the pupil in. So the pupil, this tiny little brush was so hard to work with. I am not a painter at all. My sister was the one who got really the painting gene in the family. So I had such a hard time working with this tiny little brush. It wanted to go in every direction possible, except for the one that I wanted it to go. So just go slow. If you've never painted before, go slow. So here I'm putting some more definition in those holes, just trying to get them to look like they're pretty deep in there. But go slow when you're painting if you've never painted before, and the good thing about paint is you can always paint over it. So if you feel like you make a mistake, just let it dry and paint over top of it. I did that a couple of times, especially with that brown in the eye. So I thought the eye didn't have enough definition, and you know, it is a cartoon, so I put a little bit of black around the outside of that eye. And get the pupil just a tiny bit darker. There we go. So you can kind of see how much that eye looks a lot better, but we're still not done with it. We're still not done. A little bit more definition in those up in the fins and around the eye there. And then I tried to put some black in the fins, in those back fins, and oh my goodness, was this difficult. It either was too black or it wasn't black enough. So again, layers, and that was a little bit of dry brushing that I tried there. Didn't quite work out because spray paints dry really fast, but just keep layering colors. If it's too dark, put some lighter colors on top of it. If it gets too light, put some darker colors back into it. And I promise you, you'll eventually get it right. Just keep trying. Just don't ever give up. And you will get it right in the end. The only failure in life is never trying. So just keep trying and you'll see. It'll get there. And then this is where tragedy struck. Oh no! So again, just, you know, fix your mistakes and keep working on. Remember, don't ever give up. And then I decided to try and put some yellow spray paint, which I had in the closet. And even though I washed my brush, that brush ended up putting black into it. So it just wasn't bright enough. But I used another brush and gosh darn it, did it make that eye just the right amount of brightness. So we still haven't given life to that eye yet, but we're getting there. Get some yellow in there and just keep layering the colors and it'll get there. I wanted to put a little bit of extra shine just on the tip of those fins and in the bottom of the body. And again, you'll see it gets a little too light. I keep trying to blend it out, but that spray paint just dries so quickly, you know. So I try and blend it out a little bit better, and it's just looking really bad. So I put some more blue in and just kind of covered up and dulled out some of that, and it turned out perfect. So just keep trying, keep putting layers on there, and eventually it'll get good. So the last part, you're going to take your board and your little peeperfish here, And your Dremel tool, or regular drill if you have one. If you do, use that, because the Dremel gave me some trouble. You're going to want to mark where you want your peeperfish to be. Don't push too hard because you'll bend it. Oh, good job. So, you're going to want to make just a little bit of a mark so you know where to make the hole. There you go. And then use your Dremel or drill to kind of drill a hole. The Dremel tends to bounce around a lot. This is the first time I've ever tried to use it with that drill attachment, and gosh darn it, you can see it just bounces all over the place. So it ended up making more of a mess than a hole. But eventually I stabilized it as much as I could and finally got it to drill a hole. But you want to drill a hole almost all the way through, but not so far that you go all the way through, because you don't want to drill a hole in your table. So just keep drilling until you feel like it's enough. And I got a little, you see it bounce around there? Don't get too cocky now. Okay, so now you've got a hole. You want to make sure that there's no dust in that hole. So wipe it off real good. There you go. And then check your peeper. Now that's a little too far away from the wood, I think. It's kind of wobbly. So what I'm going to do is heat up my glue gun. And while that's heating up, I'm going to kind of take a little bit of that post off of the back. And just see. So I take a little bit off and just check. Nah, that's still a little too far away. It's still a little wobbly. So I'm going to take a little bit more off. And we'll just see. A little bit at a time until you get it just right. Now that looks pretty good. So see, he's almost on the table, but he's not all the way there. So now when your hot glue gun is heated up, you want to put a bead of glue in that hole. Just enough to fill the hole, but not so much that it's overflowing. And then you're just going to take your little peeperfish, put him in the hole there, and hold him steady until that glue dries. It takes a minute. This is the glue I'm using. It's Gorilla Glue. I love Gorilla Glue. It's not sponsored, but Gorilla Glue, if you want to sponsor, just let me know. And it works really well. I mean, he's stayed on there since I made him. So, and there you go. You got a little peeperfish. Put him up on the wall. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use some command strips, put a little one here and then one right there, and hang him up on the wall like a trophy. So, see you guys next time. Hope you liked making the peeperfish. I did. Love you guys. Bye.